Good evening, everyone. So I'm here at the corner, but I'm just going to introduce Malavika and then we'll get on to stage. Good evening and welcome to this very special evening with Malavika Sarukkai, a conversation. I spent a great deal of time trying to think about an adjective to place before Malavika's name. You know, the magnificent dancer, the tremendous Malavika Sarukkai, the luminescent, the sublime, the fantastic. And all of those words really do apply, but I think none of them is adequate enough to really describe Malavika. Because I think in her perfection of form, in her perfection of dance, in the philosophical thoughtfulness of her choreography, every member of the audience then is a participant in a sublime experience. And so really putting a phrase before Malavika's name just doesn't seem enough to convey that extraordinary feeling of being part of her performances. Today we have the privilege of having an artist of the caliber of Malavika speak to us about her dance, about her art, about the development of her choreography, of her thinking. And as you saw in the blurb to the event, I'm sure, we will dive into details such as the way in which she thinks about music, the way in which she thinks about the stage, about space, about, you know, every aspect of her dance. And it really is a privilege to have an artist, as I said, of this caliber who is going to be opening up and speaking about her processes, especially because she has the gift of also being so articulate in being able to express this. So it's a very special treat indeed. And so I'm very glad that you're all here. Before I get any further, I do have to remind you to all switch off your cell phones and make sure that they're not going to suddenly glow in the middle of the event, because it's awfully distracting for all around you and also for people on stage. And once you do that, I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Bangalore International Center and the International Music and Arts Society, under whose aegis Malavika first performed. Her very debut public performance in Bangalore was under the aegis of the IMAS. And so, well, thank you to the IMAS for having that vision to invite Malavika. And also, I have to acknowledge my parents, I think, my mother, Ila Chandrasekhar, and my father, Professor S. Chandrasekhar, who were the ones who first invited Malavika here to Bangalore. And of course, I can't resist saying that. And yes, and so on behalf of the BIC and the IMAS, welcome you all, and I welcome Malavika, so we shall both get on stage and then continue the conversation. So first of all, Malavika, welcome. Oh, is this too loud? Is it all right for everyone? Yeah. Welcome, and thank you for being here, and congratulations on 50 years in dance. That's an extraordinary achievement, really. I also have to tell you that we're probably going to toss these notes out the window, which I've put in large font so I don't have to fumble for my glasses, because as we were chatting, there's so much to talk about, and Malavika is so articulate that really I'm going to let her lead this conversation and talk about aspects of dance that she wishes to speak about. But I think let's just go straight into it.
I would just like to, really thank BIC and the International Music and Arts Society for inviting me here, even considering to invite an artist to just speak about dance, without having to actually do a performance. But I think this is very important because many of you come to performances and you just see the final vision, the final act, as it were. But there is so much that goes into making it happen. There are so many layers to dance. There is so much of intellectual, emotional, coming together, almost, merging things to create a piece of art, to create a piece like a dance creation. So I'm delighted, and I'm just going to let the evening flow. I'm delighted to be here, delighted to talk dance, basically, and to share with you some aspects which have been very important for me in the last 50 years of dancing. And as Indra said, if it wasn't for her parents, who, it's a long association, and I think of them fondly for, wanting me and inviting me when I was in my, 20s, 30s, to come here and dance. But yes, so I'm looking forward to the evening, and I'm going to let it go with the flow.
Thank you, Malavika. Well, it's really a privilege for us. So, yes, to know about an artist's process, I think that's very, very special for people who follow you. So I think I'm going to ask you straight off. One thinks of Bharatanatyam, one thinks of the margam, that is the traditional structure, the form, the structure of a performance, a flow of the evening. And that's not quite etched in stone, really. It has evolved over time and developed. But it is a traditional way of presenting dance. And you stepped away from that margam. Not entirely, you hold it close, I can see. But you stepped away from it to really explore what you wanted to think about, express through dance. So tell us about that and how that came about.
It's a long story, but I'm going to try and make it brief. The margam is something we learn as the traditional repertoire. So it's a certain group of pieces which are taught to us by our gurus, and that one has to learn from them the way they want to teach us, and we have to, I think the importance is to actually relate to it when we are being taught. And at this point, I must remember my gurus in Bombay, Guru Kalyanasundaram, and in Chennai, Guru Rajaratnam and Guru Kalanidhi Narayanan. Because without their vision of dance, that's so important that when you're learning something, how is it that your teachers, your gurus, transfer their ideas, their vision? So I think it was, as a young student of dance, it was, learning the Tanjavur style in Bombay and going down and to Chennai and doing the Varuvur style. There were different kind of small variations in the way one danced. And one was, picked it up diligently from my gurus. And I did this for 20 years. So I performed the margam, which was the repertoire, which was the style, which was the definition of Bharatanatyam. It was definition. But after 20 years of training and learning and performing, and I think over a period of time internalizing dance, looking at dance, and having long discussions with my mother, Saroja Kamakshi. She was the force behind me. She was a guiding spirit. She was, she believed in the potential that dance had, Bharatanatyam, almost a fearless, potential. I mean, she just knew that classical dance could expand. Mm-hmm. And she also, I think she also had faith in my potential. So it came together, and if without her, I might not have stepped out the way I did. But I think guided by her and through these long discussions, I started to look at classical dance, the Bharatanatyam, my repertoire, slightly differently. And that was a threshold I was like crossing. Because as a dancer, as a student of dance, I looked at it as a repertoire, as a style. But with this internalizing and asking questions of tradition, it moved from being just a style to a language of dance. And when I reflect upon it and I say, why did I do it? What happened? Why did I look at it as a language? And now I feel it could be because the repertoire was really meant for the Devadasis. It was their repertoire. It was their sequence. And as a young, contemporary thinking individual, I looked at this and said, I needed ownership of what I'm dancing. I needed to own this form. And going in this more regular kind of margam was not fully satisfying, shall I say. So I have felt that that was a big question, because all through my dancing journey, I've always thought of tradition and change. I haven't thought of tradition or change. So I think when you look at dance that way, the way you read it, the way you imbibe it is different. So it was tradition and change, and therefore I was always open to, more possibilities, looking around for more possibilities. And then it became a language. So that was a language I had to own. So I think that was my big step, and I've continued to look at dance as a language. So I cannot be confined into a very strict repertoire. But having said that, I have to put across that I greatly respect Bharatanatyam. The alphabets, the movement vocabulary, there's a lot of it I respect.
Yes.
So it is working with that, but working with it differently.
Yes.
It is something which is, it's not to be done with casually. It's something I approach with great responsibility, because otherwise tradition is, you can't just move it away.
Yes.
You have to look at it carefully. It's a treasure. It's an inheritance. And then you say, how do I deal with this inheritance? How do I take it? How do I transmit it? And I think that's the question. How do we take it in each generation? Yeah. So that was an important, as I said, moment for me in my life. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm reminded of, in a way, of the Mahabharata. It's sort of a digression, but I'm reminded of the Mahabharata, and I'm developing this written dialogue with James, in fact, who read very intensely a translation of the Mahabharata, 4,000 pages or whatever it was, and then we were talking about reading, and talking about, what do you choose to read, and how do you read, and how do you expand your mind through reading. And then he made this comment on the Mahabharata, which I'm just going to read out, because it seemed to me somehow a little bit relevant to the idea of holding tradition dear and yet expanding and exploring by yourself, And so if I can find it, let me see. Sorry, I've lost my notes already. It's handling the mic and the yes, here we are. So the thing, the comment is.
You have to use your mic.
Yeah, I will. I'm just.
Yeah, because I can't hear. This light is rather bright. Do we need it so bright?
It reminded me also of your the battle within. But anyway, so what aspect of human experience does it not address, and from multiple perspectives? It provides many and at the same time no answers to fundamental questions about how to live your own particular, unique, individual life. Like the Pandavas, you have to find out for yourself. So that reminded me very much of this, of our preparatory conversations about the Margam, of how you really do explore for yourself within the structure.
And I also think, the Margam, for those who are not familiar with it, it basically deals with a lot of love poems, in great detail, in great nuance, which is wonderful to dance at a certain point of time. But as you evolve as a thinking artist, and you say, there are other emotions that I would like to explore, other areas, other ideas, other metaphors, and then it becomes imperative that you step beyond and you say, okay, Shringaram is important, but what else? What other emotions can also be, explored and interpreted through dance? And, what is a dancer saying through her dance? I think it's important. If I'm here dancing for 90 minutes, I want to really think about what I want to dance for you. Mm-hmm. It isn't just something I can just put together, roll out, and come here and dance, because dance is much more. Dance is it holds that many more, possibilities, mm-hmm. and just, much greater landscapes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so the question is, are we okay with just circumscribing ourselves to a certain area and not exploring? Mm-hmm. So that's been my yes. passion, my thrust. So yes. I've just gone about exploring and dancing.
So after that first time when you began to explore, in what direction did you move? I mean, how did you moved into, I think your first explorations were solo pieces maybe, and then you moved into larger productions. So tell me a little bit about that.
I've just always been a soloist, and my mother always thought I should be a soloist. She was quite convinced. She never really wanted me to do group work, and she didn't think, she never perhaps, saw me as somebody performing in an ensemble. So for the most part, 98% of my time has been solo. Either solo work, which I do as programs, which I could have presented for here in Bangalore, or, solo productions, like thematic productions, which take the viewer through a journey of sorts. So those are the kinds of, work I've done. And the first work I did, interestingly, was called Fireflies. Mm-hmm. And it's a strange name, and you wonder, why is it called Fireflies? But that was because I saw miniature painting where the Naika, the woman, she was an Abhisarika, and she was going in search of her beloved on this dark and stormy night, and with a lantern of fireflies. And that became, I think, now, thinking about our conversation, I was thinking, why did I do that? Why did I call it Fireflies? And I thought perhaps that is the lantern I'm still holding and journeying on these dark and unknown paths, to create new work, to create, journeys I haven't undertaken before. And I thought perhaps this is a metaphor. But this Fireflies was in 1990. And the difference was, it was Shringaram, it was man-woman relationship, it was love in separation, in union, repentance, jealousy, anger, sorrow, the whole roller coaster ride of emotions. But where it was different was I had miniature painting. I had miniature painting and I was dancing with it. So that was it was a big step in 1990. And my sister Priya had written poems for it. So it was, both of us, we collaborated. But that was the first step, and I think this lantern of fireflies has just been the lantern in my life. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Well, I must say it's been a spectacular journey, and we started this conversation about this idea of having this conversation about your choreographies when you wrote to me about Anubandh, this newest production. I don't know if any of you if many of you have seen this. It was at the Chowdhury recently, and if you haven't, you really must, because it was a an extraordinary, it was an extraordinary experience in dance, in stagecraft, in lighting, in music. I mean, really a sort of a pinnacle, if one can use it. Though I hate to use the word pinnacle because it feels as if you reach the peak, and but you're always reaching the peak. And so, an extraordinary performance. So I hope you will be doing it again, and those who haven't seen it will have the chance. And so you were talking about Anubandh, which means connectedness, and you described to me why you chose to create this piece, because it responded to this universal experience that humankind had gone through of isolation during COVID. And but it really is a narrative that takes you through a most full and vivid human journey. So tell us a little bit about Anubandh.
I was just thinking, Indra,
Yeah.
before we get to Anubandh, because that's my most recent, perhaps I could just very quickly trace a kind of,
course.
a journey through of what I've been doing.
Yes,
As I said, I've always felt dance does not exist in isolation, but it's connected with the other arts. And that has been something I have believed in, and therefore I think looked outwards towards these other influences, starting with Fireflies, which was miniature painting. So I think the other, I've also done work on, inspired by temple architecture. Yes. That was in 2000. And that was because I went to the Kandariya Mahadev temples, and I've often visited, for the festival, etc. And when you look at the temples, other than all the sculptures, it's also, I was very compelled to do a choreography which was from the outer to the inner. The passage of outer to inner. From the outer parikramas to the inner garbhagriha. So then I was looking at abstraction, I was looking at pure dance, and saying, without any emotion, it didn't have a poetry narrative or anything. It had no sahitya to, to be based on.
that is extraordinary.
Yeah, but it was just through movement. And then when you have an option like that, it's how can I use movement to suggest, and what do I want to suggest? When I'm thinking of temple architecture, at the outside of the temple, I'm thinking of angles, I'm thinking of verticality, I'm thinking of design, right? And I'm thinking of the rush of life which is outside, which quietens as you go towards the inner parikramas. So it was exciting to conceptualize this choreography. In 2000, I did this. It was called the temples, Khajuraho, the temples of the sacred and secular. But it pushed me, and that's what happens, I think, when you're doing creative work, which is outside the comfort zone, is that you're pushed to think literally outside the, familiar. Which is, at one point, it's risk. At one point, it's intimidating. It's very intimidating because you don't know what to do. You haven't done it before. And yet there's the utsaha, there's the excitement to say, how can I show this, right? And that kind of work makes the dancer explore the alphabet. We have alphabets, like in a language. But it's not, and in dance, what I'd like to share with you, it's not just putting alphabets together and making a sentence, but it is the intention with which you put that alphabet in. It is, it's surprising every time you hit that point, because when the intention changes, the alphabet looks different. And then the question is, how does the mind affect the body so much? How does it? But I think here what I would like to, share with the audience here, unless the body, which I mean is the mind and the body, the being, unless the being is tuned, what you think is not how, doesn't change the way it's expressed. So then the whole question for an artist, for a dancer, is to say, how can I make this body an instrument. An instrument, which means, making it very brief for all of you, which actually takes 30, 40 years, but I'm going to really crunch it down. How do I dance without being egocentric? How can I do it? If I can't shift that centering of the ego, the body cannot become an instrument. I don't know, is it too dance talk?
It makes sense, actually. No. It makes sense because I think it's, for an artist, it's a kind of immersion into the art, really, and stepping away from yourself. All the influences that are within you certainly are entering the expression of the art, but then they have to somehow sublimate or melt or something, and then emerge independent of you. I think that it really is. I mean, it all sounds a bit hokey, maybe, but I completely understand what you're saying.
So it's in the first 20 years, you don't actually understand this. So we're talking of 30, 40 years. When you're working and fine-tuning the body, it is fine-tuning, finding a balance between mind and body, and in movements as well, which is a whole nother subject. But to say, if I want you to know or experience my intention, this instrument, the dancing body, has to become very, very, very finely tuned. And it's a constant process. It isn't something you can do for 2 months and then forget that concept, and then it is something you live with. It becomes a living, preoccupation, a dancing preoccupation. How do you dislodge the ego, which is absolutely holding center stage, defiant and not wanting to be dislodged in any way? How do you do it? What is it? And then it becomes that there is energy in the being. So then dance becomes not a physical movement, is what we see. On the visual level, we're just seeing physical movement, but dance then becomes energy. It is the energy in the body which you're aware of, which the dancer is sensitive to, and then it is magic. I don't know if I'm making sense to all of you, or have I gone too far or too deep? No, I'm glad. Because this is dance talk. This is what all of you need to know, because this is what the dancer is attempting to do. And this is what takes so many years of our life. And this is what gives you an experience. Otherwise, you would see dance as entertainment. If you come into a program and if you are, just wowed by everything the dancer's doing, the dancer's athletic, the dancer's attractive, the music is great, and the lights are all there, and you go away, if it doesn't leave a resonance, it's come part of the way. For me, this is personal, I think dance needs to leave a resonance. For me, then it's complete. If I dance and you share and you come into this world that I have created, it's complete. But if I don't bring you into this world, then it's half done. I don't know, again, as I said, this is also about the rasa theory. The whole rasa theory of saying that the audience participation in the dance is critical.
And we feel it in your performances, Malavika. I mean, I have to say, I think many of us have been to performances which are entertainment, but we come to yours and you leave with the resonance and you think about what you've danced and you feel what you've danced for many days afterwards. I mean, probably even now I remember your earlier performances. I mean, even now something resonates suddenly from. I think that James's comment about the Mahabharata was very much responding to conversations with you as well and to performances he's seen of yours. So, yeah.
You know what I would also, if you can, a moment, like want to touch upon. You said I was talking of sculpture and how sculpture influences an artist, if you wish to. I mean, needn't influence if you don't want to. But if you are looking at other artistic expressions, then there are influences. Mm-hmm. For something very simple, there is this relief in Mamalapuram of Mahishasuramardini, right? And we have the goddess Devi, and she's advancing, she's moving towards Mahisha. And Mahisha is retreating. Now you might just look at it and say, okay, the Devi, and you look at it and you know she's a goddess because she's got her, the symbols of the goddess. But as an artist, as a dancer, when you look at the body language, there is so much to learn from sculpture. They were extraordinary artists, all of them anonymous. We don't know who they are, but they came and they, through their tapasya, through their skill and mastery, have given us these enduring images. And often, if you were to look closely at these sculptures, you would see breath. You will know there's breath. And then you say, how is it? How can I feel breath in stone or bronze? But there is breath. But you have to look for it, and you have to sense it. So the looker there again, the one who's looking at the sculpture, has also to sense it. For me, what was special when I was doing a choreography on the goddess, again, I think this was somewhere in 2000, when I noticed body language. For example, Mahisha is retreating with the mace. And he retreats like this.
Yes. Do you want me to hold this for you? Or this is okay? Yeah. Yes.
So when Mahisha, can you hear me? Yes. So when he's retreating, Mahisha, he retreats not like beneath in broad positions, because he's a demon, right? So he's retreating not this way, but this way. The moment this shoulder is lifted, and there is fear. There is fear which is running through the body. It isn't an expression of fear alone, but it is the body language. This. Can you see the difference? Yeah. The difference to this too. Or if Devi is coming towards him with the bow and arrow, she's the goddess. There is a stretch of the torso, but the weight is going into this leg. This arm is stretched. This arm is stretched. It would not be the same like this. What is that? It gives you the sense of a greater force, shall we say? Right? This foot is very light. This foot on waist is very light. The weight, the force, the thrust is on this side. But it's not. That's different. She's a goddess. She's standing. So the whole, as I said, minute working of the body becomes and that's what gives me the excitement to constantly dance, is to find these nuances which we can so easily miss. But the nuance is the creative detailing is what communicates. And so I think an artist has to be observant, has to be aware of everything. everything around. So, this was, as I said, sculpture. I've done different things on sculpture. I've done a piece of, which was inspired by the Thiruvananthapuram Padmanabha Swami temple. The three doorways of perception. So I use the three doorways that we actually with. So he says when Lakshmi saw Padmanabha, his left arm reminded her of a garland of blue lotuses, which she longed to have around her. That's how she viewed his left arm. So she came in through one doorway. When the asuras, the demons, when they saw Padmanabha Swami, they saw his left arm like the thunderbolt, and they were fearful of it. So they were seeing the same arm, but like the thunderbolt. And then they say when the devotees came and saw the Lord, they saw him, this left arm, like the branch of a tree which gives them refuge. So this left arm had to be used with a sense of shringaram, of love for Lakshmi. So a certain sense of shringaram, love. Of, shall we say, of force when it came to the asuras, and a sense of grace when it came to the sense of protective. So, I mean, dance is many layered. Dance is many layered. I could go on like this, but it'll be too much. We'll all be doing a very long course on dance. But I think one more thing which I have worked on, since it's about work, etc., is what about the music we use for dance?
Yes,
which is a huge, I think we spoke about that.
Speak about that, yes.
If I could just go into that. It's easy to take a lot of sahityam and to do it. Sahityam meaning poetry. Because there is so much that is given, and we have this phenomenal language of gestures, hastas, hastabhinaya. And so we can say so many things which are with our gestures, and it becomes rather satisfying because there's so much. But I think in a choreography, especially when we're doing work outside the margam, outside the more traditional known structures, it becomes what kind of music can you use? And in my work, I pay a lot of attention to texturing my music. Texturing, whether it's rhythm texturing, whether it's instrumental texturing, whether it's how much poetry I have. Where do I give silence? Isn't silence important? Isn't silence part of music? Isn't silence equally important? But I think one needs to, think in great nuanced detail to even come upon this, because it's much easier, in dance to just do a lot of fiery footwork, and that brings in the applause. It's much more difficult to say more with less. To say more with less. So can we pare it down to essential? And can we speak that language of dance, which then strikes home? People ask me, do you have to understand the dance? I say, please don't understand it. I really don't want people understanding this dance. If you feel with it, that's it. You just have to feel. I mean, if the artist is honest enough and authentic enough and giving of her best or his best, the audience, you have to only feel. You have to allow yourselves to feel. To feel. Because you need empathy. Life is about empathy, isn't it? And I think that's where the arts come in a big way. in these days, when we're all seeking knowledge, right? What about feeling? As human beings, do we not need to feel? Or is feeling somehow something less important? Is thinking enough? Is the rational mind telling us what to do, is that enough? What about feeling? I think what the arts do, and I think what dance does, for me in particular, is takes me towards feeling. And through my work, what I'd like to share with you is this whole range of humanness of us, you know?
Yes.
So it's a long journey.
Wow, that was fantastic, Malavika, really. That was fantastic. Thank you for taking us on a part of this journey. I don't even know where we can go from here. I mean, there's just
To Anubandh.
To Anubandh, absolutely. Uh, to Anubandh, because that is about humanness.
It is about humanness, but just one thing perhaps I should mention is talking about feeling and doing work outside the more regular repertoire. I'm fascinated by trees. I mean, trees are my friends, and I think we just coexist on this planet with trees. And don't ask me why I have this particular fascination, but I've always had. So I've done trees in different ways, Forest of Dvaitavana, or Timaka's story, again the tree, or Gita Govinda, the bower and the trees, so it goes on. But what I realized, again, this was a huge stepping moment, stepping out of something I knew into something I don't know, but I was getting to know, was when I started looking at trees. And when we say tree, what do we think? Of the word. We think of an image, right? But for an artist, for a dancer, we have many hastas for trees, or at least a few hastas for trees. This would be tree. If I did this, this is tree in the language of dance. But as a dancer, when you approach this, you ask yourself, how does a tree feel? How does it feel for the sap to rise through its trunks? How does it feel to stretch into the skies? How does it feel when birds make nests in its branches? How does it feel when the breeze touches an individual leaf? Sometimes you see trees and just one or two leaves are moving. So how does a tree feel? Are we interested? Do we wish to know?
Yes. Yes.
And this questioning of it made me get closer. These are all attempts, we can't ever say we've got any place. To a quality of feeling called treeness. Treeness. So it's not the word. It's not the word. The tree is not the word. All the labels we give it is not the word. Treeness. And I worked with that. I worked with that quality of feeling to say, what is it when the tree roots deep and grows? What is that energy? What is that force? What is the force of the sap that rises up? What is the force of the roots which are going into the earth? What is that movement? What is that quality of being? So when you look at it, then to interpret tree, we get closer to something, or at least that's what I imagine. And that's been my path. So I've worked with that. Again, that becomes a very important aspect of saying the isness of things. It's life breath, which is prana. So then we move away from this outer decorative world and we move into something which is essential. Essential to tree, essential to me, to you, to us. Prana, life force. And then I try to make this instrument empathize with that moment. And it's a fascinating journey. It's fascinating. It's personal, it's intimate, but then the dance, I always say the dancing body is the site. It's the site of heritage. It's the site of inheritance. It's the site of the present. So the dancing body becomes more than a feminine form, which would be a huge trivializing of it, which the world sometimes does. It's so easy to slot dancers as, somebody is, they look beautiful when they dance. A dance is much more. Dance is a much bigger, it's a much vaster world. And it's up to us to discover it.
Thank you, Malavika, and thank you for allowing us to be part of that journey of discovery. Every performance of yours is a journey of discovery. Really, it's really true. I don't know whether you want to enter Anubandh now or open to questions. What would you like to do? Would you like to talk a little bit about Anubandh?
Very quickly.
Yes.
The last many years, as I said, I've done work on sculpture and I've been influenced by sculpture, temple architecture, or miniature painting. I've done a lot of compositions, choreographies, where I've been inspired by what I've seen as miniature paintings, and often with Dr. B.N. Goswami, this acclaimed art historian. And we have worked together, and that's been a huge influence in my dance life. But more recently, I've been thinking about human conflict and the crises we all face. And pre-COVID, I did a production, The Battle Within, right, which was on the Bhagavad Gita. That is, of course, the crises of the existential crisis that Arjuna faces with Krishna as his conscience, and this conversation. That was very different because it was two male characters. I was doing two male characters for 90 minutes, which was very difficult. And it was a warrior, and anyway, and that again was just probing the self, and the crises within that we all feel. But COVID changed that. Over this 2 years, I started looking at, as I said, Anubandh, as Indra mentioned, was a response to this isolation, trepidation, loneliness, fear, anxiety, uncertainty of what we felt. And what came to me was, we need to collectively connect. We need to reach out. And that's why it's called Anubandh Connectedness. And I also found that I wanted to speak about the primordial energies of the sun and the moon and the Pancha Mahabhutas, the elements. So it was the human being connecting with nature, connecting with earth, Prithvi, connecting with water, connecting with Vayu, wind, connecting with Agni. The number of fires we saw during the Delta, when Delta hit, the funeral pyre, and then finding space, Akasha. So Anubandh was a result of a lot of introspection, reflection, and it gave me a purpose in those 2 years. I could hold on to something and create some work. But it was about conflict. It was the conflict we see in the world today. The disparity, the anxiety, the sorrow, sukha, dukkha, all these things. So Anubandh is a journey in itself, and I must say, every time I dance it, I feel I've lived a lifetime. It just takes me through a whole range of emotions, which is so real, which is so in the present, which is so something which confronts us, every day. And it is a call of hope, for this transformative power of hope, of saying, isn't the human being capable of more? Do we not have more in us? Or are we just to be sort of, discarded or given up as hopeless? Where is hope? How do we find it? Isn't it there within us? And so Anubandh is finally, it moves towards hope, and therefore it's expansive. It's expansive in emotion, but it's a journey. And so I hope whenever I come back and present it in Bangalore, all of you will be there to see it. And some of you have seen it, but
I think the other thing that was very extraordinary about it is it was both such an individual, your very individual response to this very strange period that we've all lived through, but also such a universal experience. All of the world was going through a similar thing, and so it's so essentially contemporary and yet eternal. And so it was really a very, again, I'm repeating myself, but I'm saying it was profound to be part of that, be part of the audience in that experience of Anubandh. So thank you. I'm sure there must be, please switch off your phone, whoever that is. So I'm sure there might be questions. And so shall we allow the audience to, if you would come up to the mic here so that people can, you can be recorded also, and people who will eventually watch this online can also hear the questions. Yes, thank you, Lata. It should be. I think if you just speak, it should start.
Is it on?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
it's on now? Okay. Mala and Indra, firstly, thank you for such a wonderful talk. And it brought back a lot of memories. Mala, I've seen many of the productions you talked about, in fact, most of them. But I noticed one omission, and that's why I came up to ask you to speak about that. And that was Tari. Because, you did mention that you were primarily a solo artist and you had not done many group performances, or very few. But Tari, I think, was a group performance, and it was a very unique piece of choreography. So I want you to talk about the creation of Tari and what it felt like to be in a group ensemble, and in fact, whether you've done anything else where you've danced with others. Thank you.
yes, I think I kind of missed that. To speak about ensemble work, it's called Tari the Loom, and it was inspired by an article I read by a sociologist when she was describing the different parts of the sari and the history of the sari and the weavers, and she was writing about them. And I was sitting in my courtyard and I read this and I said, oh my God, this is dance. This has to be danced. And immediately at that point, I could see that work had to be group work. Because it takes so long as a writer, you would know, I'm sure you feel the same thing, that unless you're fired by an idea over a long period of time, you can't really sustain it. It has to be a force in your life. Otherwise, you can't create it, because everything takes so many months and hours and years to create. So Tari the Loom was inspired by the sari, and it had a lot of abstract dance choreography, because there was one which was just the dance with the parivattams, the loom, the spindles. So that was with a group of dancers, and one dancer sitting here, and she might tell you how many hours we practiced to make it happen. The other one was called warp and weft. On the warp, which is the constant, and weft, which is the variable. And it was also about our life. You know, there is the constant, shall we say, the constant, constant thread, and the weft. And it depends, we all weave saris differently. As our lives go by, our saris are different. And that was again a pure dance with dancers. And when I danced it at JBT, at NCPA, I remember someone asked me, but how could you share the stage with other dancers? Like, you've just reigned over this stage for so many years. How did you ever even give them space on the stage? And I said, oh, I quite enjoyed it. I enjoyed the dancing, I didn't enjoy the rehearsals. Because getting all of them, they're all fabulous dancers and they're all very busy. So getting rehearsal time, which I insist upon, nothing happens without rehearsals, that was problematic. But dancing was great because it was another energy to dance with, and younger dancers, but wonderful dancers. And, it was experience, I think, for me, definitely, and I think for them as well, because, learning a production is not just learning the structure, but it's conversations on dance, it's on the making of dance. So there are lots of other discussions which are going on, which I think was exciting for the whole crew. And the last of this, last choreography was called the Sari. And it was about the Ganga Jamuna, the two borders, and all the motifs that we find within it, of the peacock and the parrot for love. And so it was a many splendored thing, as we say. But it ended on a point of a little bit of mystery, as I like to always. I think I always find some mystery at some point. So I end my work at that there. But that was, an ensemble work.
Oh, well, thank you. That's one of your pieces that I haven't actually seen, so one of these days, hopefully. In fact, that leads me to a question, unless someone's just reaching for the mic, leads me to a question. In fact, you work with many of these young dancers, mentor them, teach them, train, etc., etc. But you do a lot for dance, actually, both in mentorship and also in supporting other dancers through your trust. So I wondered whether you'd like to speak about that a little.
Yes, I think that's a very kind of important point, because I do have a trust called Kalavahini. And this trust was a way I felt I could give back to this world of dance. And I think this picture kind of summarizes what I feel, because I think it's that I've been gifted so much. And I'm thankful for this gift of dance, of being able to live a life in dance. The Kalavahini, this trust I founded in 2015, was a way of saying, how can I give back to the world of dance? How can I give back to dancers? How can I support them? What can I do for them? What can I do for Gen Next and for the millennials? And one of the projects we have is called Dance Immersion Program. And that's when we try to go away for a retreat for a 3-day, and we talk, think, live, dance. And I find that very, rejuvenating, because and talking with younger dancers, they have different ways of looking at dance, the young men and women. So we have something called Dance Immersion Program, which is immerse yourself, please drown in dance, and if you feel drowned, that's fine. If you feel like, oh my God, I can't take any more of it, that's fine, because we need to also feel the intensity of dance. And we have other dance festival I hold in Chennai called Dance for Dance. Again, as you can see, I'm dance-centric. So it's called Dance for Dance. And again, we try to get the dancers to perform in the main season, because that's where they like to dance, in December. So there are these kind of projects we have. Sometimes we've had smaller, workshops with senior artists, and I think that's again very important, that we get other senior artists, that they are exposed to the way they think and they vision dance. So it's trying to create not a community would be too big a word, but a few, like a smaller group of people who want to take dance seriously, who are willing to deliberate discourse on dance more seriously. And I think that's what Kalavahini is, attempting to do. And I mentor a few students.
Yeah. Lucky then. Prem, you had a question?
Yeah, I'd like to just read a short quotation from Martha Graham and then ask a question about it. And she says, I believe that we learn by practice. Whether it means to learn to dance by practicing dancing or to learn to live by practicing living, the principles are the same. In each, it is a performance of a dedicated, precise set of acts, physical or intellectual, from which comes shape of achievement, the sense of one's being, the satisfaction of spirit. One becomes, in some area, an athlete of God. Practice means to perform over and over again in the face of all obstacles, some act of vision, of faith, of desire. Practice is a means of inviting the perfection desired. So it seems to me that on the one hand, there are some of the things you talked about getting into feelings, the isness of things beyond ego. And on the other hand, there's this comparatively prosaic dedication to daily practice, to sadhana. And there seems to be almost a tension between the two rather than a connection. One has to step into the practice in the faith that the other will emerge from it. So I was wondering if you could speak on how you've handled that tension.
Oh, I find it so interesting. Please send me the quote. I think what the dancer does is practice. But there are many stages to the dancer. From being a student of dance, being a dancer, to being a mature dancer, to being an artist. So I'm talking about this 40, 50 years of passage of time. What we do with practice is, it's the outer precision of movements, etc., that we want, or even of expression. There is a certain precision and exactness that we want. So we do that. But when the mind and body are coming together, the way I can describe it, I'm going to try and describe it, is that think something is very opaque initially. That's practice. When it starts getting translucent, it's the other feeling. It's the other athlete of God. It's to get this grossness subtle. It is to get sthula sukshma. So it's in the same thing. It's not different things. It's like, how can I get this body, which is overall gross, which is sthula sharira, how can I get it to be sukshma? How can I, yes, perhaps I can say this. How can I dance with awareness? The more awareness I bring into the practice, the more awareness of every part of me. The more awareness I bring in, it starts getting, or according to me, it's my experience, it starts getting a bit translucent. And when it starts getting translucent, then you feel another energy, another something. But it's not different, it's within. It's just refining the dancing body.
Does anyone else have a question? Yes? Do you mind coming up, Geeta?
Malavika, I have a question about choreography. I had the pleasure of seeing Anubandha, and I'll refer to one of the elements, that's of the Panchabhutas, fire. How did you go about choreographing that particular idea? For example, I know you went from fire to the funeral pyres. How did that come? Is it music that comes first, or is it you make the music after you think through the idea? How do you structure it is a question.
You know, ideas germinate, like they take seed. And if you keep watering them, other things start growing. For me, my concept, the way I'm going to hold the whole piece together, is critical. So I would think of fire, because the Panchamahabhutas, and I was sure I wanted to do the funeral pyre, because I'd seen so many of them. But the funeral pyre is different. I've done the funeral pyre in other work as well, but it's different. It changes. The music has to follow my concept. So for me, that becomes, important. So I would have a fairly detailed picture of what I want to do, speak to my team of musicians in rehearsal, and get them to respond to that and say, this is what I'm looking for, how can you do it? What do you do? And so there's something organic which is happening. Sometimes things change in the rehearsal, but but there is a lot of demand on the team of musicians to understand the concept. They can't just sing it the way I've sung it in some other place. You know, it's very unique and very special to each work. But music would dictate. But before music, it's my idea and concept. So I have to go step by step, and it grows over a period of time. You know, I mean, Anubandh for me took 2 years. It really, very, very gradually. And so, as I said, one needs the passion, commitment, just curiosity to say, oh God, I've got to finish this piece. How am I going to do it? It takes a long time.
Thank you.
Speaking of the funeral pyres, in fact, your depiction of fire in different pieces is so different, actually. I mean, we were talking just before we came in about the Lament of the Old Woman, which you had spoken about it in an earlier conversation that you'd had at the BIC, in fact, with MAP. And there, the funeral pyre you depict of the old woman whose son has just died is imbued with grief, whereas the fire, when you did it in Anubandh, was very primal. You know, it's very interesting how it's the same similar gesture, the same depiction, but completely different emotion.
Yeah, that's what I was, mentioning earlier on about the whole thing of intention and how intention would change it. And for example, I mean, instead of funeral pyre, if I was to think of something a little more easy to visually look at, there is this song when it's from Andal's Nachar Tirumari, 8th century. It's a very beautiful, innocent kind of song, and it is the first time these young women have seen Krishna. So instead of putting a flute to it, for example, the choice of music, they are building sandcastles by the water's edge. Krishna comes along. So normally what the choice would be, let's put flute because Krishna has arrived, right? So we put a flute to it and we all know Krishna has arrived. But what I did was, somehow I felt the flute didn't work there. So what I did was silence. And my musicians thought there's something wrong here. Like, I need to fill it. And I'm saying, no, I need to empty it. I need to empty it because then Krishna arrives. And this description of Krishna, perhaps I can just go there. I just like to, to say how delicate it is, because it's the first time they have seen Krishna. Then you say, is Krishna a person? Is Krishna presence? Is Krishna a god? Is Krishna an image? Who is Krishna? Is Krishna a moment? Is Krishna something we feel? So there are all these other questions. But, very quickly, of saying, sense of Krishna, because it's the first time they're seeing Krishna. It isn't, can you see it, this has a sense of heaviness to the body, to the movement, but because they are surprised and they're, at the first time they're looking, there's a delicacy in the way even the foot is kept. It isn't. Do you see a difference? This too, they're taking him in for the first time. So even the way a foot is placed on the floor, on the ground, is different. So the first time they see, it isn't, this is definite. This is, what do I see? And so this sense of this delicacy of movement to the firmness here, there's a difference. It isn't, it's not that, because here they are busy making sandcastles. And in this song, this is the actual physical sandcastle. So what they say is, don't break this sandcastle. Don't break it. They want him, but they say, go away. So they are confused by his charm. At another point they say, these sandcastles that we make. Now this movement of sandcastle is very different to the first one. I hope it's clear.
Yeah.
If it's not clear, I'll do it again. So this movement, and why is it different? Yeah, because, and these sandcastles are the sandcastles of emotions. They're saying, don't break this. Don't do this to us, Krishna. If you look even more closely at this movement, I could do it this way, or I could do it this way. What is the difference?
More drawn out.
When I arch my back, there is longing, which is not there if I do this. This. So there's love, there's emotion. This hasta is going very gently, because these are the sandcastles of emotions. And they say these sandcastles, and they're looking at him because they long for him. They want him. So this arch of the body, which is minute, makes a difference. Makes the difference. This. So I'm saying this kind of, when I said this kind of body language is absolutely, it's at many levels. And there is no end, at least what I found, no end to it. There's no limit. There is no limit. Because the more I practice, the more because alone in my studio, the more I discover. And it's fascinating to say, how can the body be so fine in expression? But that's another day of a lecture demonstration.
Well, thank you, Malavika. That was just beyond belief, and I feel dreadfully honored to have been your sort of silent counterfoil here. I'm so very happy to have been able to have you on stage to talk about your choreography. I know that Anu from the International Music and Arts Society is going to give us a formal thank you, but as she comes up, thank you from
Thank
my
you.
side.
I've enjoyed myself. I hope all of you have.
Dear friends, it has been a great privilege and pleasure to host this fascinating conversation between Indira Chandrasekhar and Malavika Sarukkai, whose association with the International Music and Arts Society goes back to 1983, where she gave an Odissi performance accompanied by her guru, Kalucharan Mohapatra. She has performed several times for this lovely forum, which has been the co-sponsor for various conferences held at Bangalore. The most recent one being Shakti Shaktiman Energies, a powerful piece celebrating Shiva and the Devi in their iconic forms. Today was a very empathetic discussion, which was skillfully conducted by Indira Chandrasekhar, an author and scientist. Thank you. And we have been allowed insightful glimpses into an intensely creative process of Malavika Sarukkai and her 50-year-old journey into dance and choreography. So on behalf of the International Music and Arts Society, I would like to thank the Bangalore International Center for their collaboration and the perfect arrangements that made this evening possible. I would now like to request Lata Reddy to come up on stage and present bouquets to Malavika and Indira, and she will be accompanied by Urmila Devi of IAMS. Thank you all so much.
I just want to put in one more small thing, because dance is, it takes so many years, and what is really taxing for dancers and artists is the sheer practice that we have to do. So what you see on stage doesn't come about in 1 month, 2 months. It comes after years and years and hours of very hard work, where it's very lonely. We just got ourselves, we have nothing else to look ahead into, but it's just dance. And dance is really a result. Those moments of ecstasy, those moments of bliss really come about after this very long passage. I just want to make that also clear, because dance is difficult.